And so this meeting is being recorded and televised, and will be available to be streamed later. My name is Nicole Crutchfield. I'm the planning director for the city of Fargo, and thank you so much for joining us today. Familiar faces in the audience, and this seems really formal. I'm like really far away from you guys. And so hopefully I have about 15 minutes of highlights of the last 5 years of HUD work, partnerships with many of the folks that are in our audience. And then we do hope to have a more robust conversation, opportunity for questions and answers, and also availability for if you do want to bug out early after you see the presentation. We do have forums for public comments. Reach out to us individually for meetings and discussion later. And so I'll go ahead and get started then. So again, this information really is part of our standard requirement as part of the HUD administration, Housing and Urban Development Administration. We are required to have a public information meeting, and so this meets that mandate, as well as though really what we're trying to do is share information from our team about what we've learned over the last 5 years, hear what we're studying, or listen to as we present some of the elements that we're studying about the community-wide issues, and then to hear from you and have conversation about those on the front lines doing the work and outside of City Hall, and really talk about what is our, as a whole community, working on as we talk about the housing continuum, housing issues, and priority needs. I want to introduce our team first. We have Christy Silskar with HUD Administrator. So I'll be talking a little bit about our transition and staff. But Christy's here in the front row. She'll be available to answer some questions. We have Catlin Christie and Emily McAllister. They are our project administrators and assistant planners. And then new to our team, we have Jody Miller, and she's our office associate. And so we're still, as you know, a bit in that transition from maybe years ago and some of those key retirements. And I think as we set our 5-year path forward, we're excited about what our future brings. So I am going to bring a kind of a brief highlight, like I said, a presentation that talks about what we've been studying, and then open it up for Q&A and discussion. So really, what are we talking about today? We wanted to highlight a little bit of some of the HUD regional challenges and our local challenges, the procedural changes that we foresee, and some strategy changes. First of all, with the administrative changes at the federal administrative level, that can't be unsaid about all the things that are in the news today. But one of the good things that's come out of the transition in the federal level is those that do administer HUD dollars are working closer and more effectively than ever to try to manage the future risks of losing these funds. And so it should be not for, I'll just back up. It is necessary to talk about in the presidential budget this year, forthcoming, is removing all of these programs from federal administration. We're talking about 55-year-old programs that have been the backbone of our community's service needs in housing, homelessness, and many other programs. So we are working on enhancing our strong statewide network. We work with our other entitlement cities, Bismarck, Minot, Grand Forks, as well as the state, who also administer these HUD funds. And I know those that are in our audience also minister HUD funds, and so you know exactly what we're talking about. Some of these changes are also happening in terms of our direct correspondence with HUD. Our office administrator is in Denver. Our regional administrator is in Denver. Those transitions and our access to resources are changing almost on a daily basis. So we keep in touch with each other. We do feel like Fargo is in a good position as we strategize for our next 5 years, but that really does mean we need additional communication, coordination, and advocacy as we move forward. So what does this mean locally? Locally, I wanted to talk about as we've flattened our department, if you will, strategically. So for those that maybe have been used to working with maybe Monica in the years past, Dan Molly years past, Christy and Jasmine. I should have mentioned Jasmine's unable to be here today with us, but she very much is our program administrator. And but you'll see me more involved as the planning director on a daily basis, and looking at our recipients in the audience here are familiar with over the last year my involvement at a deeper, more tactile level. And as we look at succession planning, the goal is when we look at the city of Fargo and how we administer those funds, we're really conscientious about the next 20 years and how we manage these funds, not just the next 5 years, but administratively how we're managing the next 20 years of these funds and how we collaborate with our partners metro-wide. As part of that, we were lucky enough to be able to use general fund dollars to hire some technical assistants. We are starting to work with Cloudburst. They are a national technical expert in this work. We do make access to that technical advisory services to you as recipients as well. We are focused on, as we set forth some new programs, working with this technical assistance to make sure we have our policies and procedures and expectations set as we move forward in the next several years. One of the things you'll hear me highlight, both if we're working on a direct level and as we're working later today as we talk, the need for risk analysis. And so that risk analysis sometimes leads us into some uncomfortable discussions as we look through deeper dive with the administration of these dollars. We do have to remember we're all trying to be good stewards of the dollars, and I know it's everybody's intent to also be good stewards of those dollars. So today, whether you're listening publicly or here in our audience, whether you're new or have been part of HUD funds, just really the quickest way to talk about the funds we're talking about today is our CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Funds, and our Home Investment Partnership Funds, the HOME program. And really the best way to think of those are, the item one, the Community Development Block Grant dollars, we're really, are about construction projects, maybe some public service dollars, but that's really construction related. And then those home dollars are really about all things housing. And so whether it's supporting the tenant-based rental assistance or construction, demolition, and we've had the opportunity to work in different levels of housing as we work towards that. A little bit about the HUD funds themselves. We tend to work in 5-year cycles. And what's also especially confusing is our fiscal year, HUD's fiscal year, doesn't align with the city's fiscal year. So we're just starting out 2025. And so even though we're in June, it makes it really hard to manage the funds. But soon after this meeting, you'll see a 30-day public notice for our end of year report for 2024. And so really we think about this as 5-year cycles. We're getting ready to start the next 5-year cycle, 25 to 29. And then each year we do an action plan where we dig into those goals deeper. So today we wanted to just highlight, we're seeking to develop our goals. Our goals at the very high level are probably of no surprise to anybody because our housing needs and our poverty needs are staying pretty consistent, if not increasing. And but really it's about the action plan and those annual activities as we move forward. Soon after this meeting, you'll see me talk about this, but soon after this meeting, we'll have a draft plan of these 5-year goals, and then those will be published. We'll have a public hearing at the City Commission, and then look for those adoption of those 5-year of that 5-year plan. So a little bit of highlight on the needs identified for the next 5 years. Again, probably for those that are, I'm looking at an audience that's full of implementers. And so as we look at those implementers, Housing stability, housing preservation is a huge need when it comes to affordable housing. Ending and preventing homelessness, providing service to individuals with extremely low income or no income, the public infrastructure and neighborhood improvements, as well as the expectation for fair housing. So we're very glad to and appreciate the ability to partner with High Plains Fair Housing to help us with the Fair Housing Administration, and really seeking, as we do our own analysis of impediments to housing, because we do believe that housing and the barrier-free housing is necessary no matter what your demographic is. And I should add, it's a federal mandate. And so one of the things that, if you've been working with the planning department and the city of Fargo over the last 5 years, you hear us talk about housing and our community needs in many different ways. One of them, over the last 5 years, we've updated our growth plan, our 2024 growth plan. We, of course, have the last consolidated plan from the city. Just 2 years ago and last year, we finished the MetroCog Regional Housing Study, our first ever region-wide housing needs and market assessment. Partnering with BSI, we did a downtown affordable housing study, and to really try to mark our needs and trends we were seeing, as well as the downtown in focus plan. As we look at some trends over those, so I'm going to next highlight trends over those 5 plans, is really needing more subsidies in housing, especially deep subsidy, needing the operational support in housing, emergency housing, eviction and prevention, the increase in poverty, the increase in cost burdens, and the increase of capacity building. And really, as we go into the next themes, I'll start to highlight those. As we look at our needs overview, this is an excerpt from the HUD databases that we use. And really over the last 10 years, the good news is we see an increase in wage and median income and by 45%. And we also see an increase in our demographics by 20%. As we look at the chart below, again pulled from ACS data and census data, we really are seeing almost 60% of our households that are below 100% of average median income for that family. And so being that what this chart starts to show is what is that housing area median family income, and the needs as it relates to the income source and the type of households. So larger families tend to have a little bit more poverty, as well as elderly, more poverty. And so it starts to look at the scientific aspects as we look at the data needs. This is an excerpt of our Maxfield research study, what I call the Maxfield research study. This is the downtown and core neighborhood plan area study that we partnered with BSI a few years ago. And really what this starts to show us is how what the deficit starts to look like if we don't keep up with supply of especially subsidized housing. And I'm not going to go through the numbers here, but basically we need to be building another 300 units a year to keep up with demand. And so I'll talk more about that as we move forward. This is an excerpt from our MetroCog regional housing study. Again, what is starting to show here, what is interesting is income is increasing on that far right. We're seeing more households making more than $150,000, and we're seeing on the far left, we're seeing more households falling out of the low income range, less than 20,000. And what this goes to start to talk about, though, is displacement and where is that differential need. And so, again, I won't go into the deep details. All of these studies are available online for further depth and analysis. Really, when we talk about multifamily affordable housing, as partners in our audience here can say as well, is really we're looking at how does the HUD funds work with the other resources out there. And as more housing is subsidized, most of that housing is built with tax income credits that are available through the federal and state levels. And if you listen to housing developers, especially those that try to find funds or capital to build housing and amass those funds, the city funds have been historically used to close that gap in financing. And this is just a quick snapshot of where that housing is located throughout the last 5 years. And some of those include rehabbing some of those units as well. And then another term that we typically use with defining housing needs is cost burdened. And so when the households are paying more than 30% of their income on households, we classify that as housing cost burdened. And obviously on this slide, we're seeing over 96% of those making $20,000 or less are cost burdened. And that typically means that they're having to choose how they have their income and if they're choosing housing over other needs. And many other nonprofit organizations work at this level of need as well. So I'm going to switch gears real quick into the Core Neighborhoods Plan. And this is a study that we began in 2020, and as we finalized in 21 and have a good 10 to 20 years of policies and priorities highlighted in this study. And it really starts to focus on the need for the immediately surrounding neighborhoods. It's the older neighborhoods and those immediately surrounding downtown. It's vital to sustain those neighborhoods as they represent a city that is financially solvent and healthy. In 2021, we analyzed blights and elements of blights over the entire city. And the darker color on the left starts to show where some stabilizing in those housings or where those are depreciating. And if we look at the right, that map starts to show the need to focus on stabilizing the housing and keeping those related to market needs. Obviously, that includes keeping people in their homes, providing services that would keep people in their homes longer. So I'm going to switch gears to the last 5 years of our consolidated plan. And we do use the word CON plan as an abbreviation for consolidated plan. And I'll try to demystify federal speak as we can. But just as a quick highlight, in 2025, our goals were related, our previous 5 years, our goals were related to affordable housing, ending and preventing homelessness, neighborhood improvements, and assisting vulnerable populations. We don't really see a change in those goals moving forward. And in fact, we see kind of prioritizing some of those goals over others and doubling down, if you will, to make a greater impact as we consolidate resources. I won't highlight our accomplishments. You'll see this in the forthcoming CAPER, but also you have the slide in your handout. I'm too short to see the projector of the slides in front of me. So as we look at the accomplishments for the 2020 and 2024 comp plan, one of the things I'm especially proud of is that it's the range of geography that we're trying to reach out to, and thanks to our partners and their investments. And so you'll see the map show with the red dots projects as south of 32nd Avenue South and as north as 19th Avenue North, with the majority of those projects scattered within the downtown and surrounding downtown. And the 5-year plan wouldn't be complete if we didn't celebrate our successes. And so we're really especially proud of the projects and work that I'm especially proud of the team and the partnerships we've had to develop these projects, because we all know they don't necessarily come easily. And so we have our new housing at Elliott Place, new housing at the Milton Earl. I think both of these projects from the start to finish were in mind's eyes of city leaders 15 years ago. And so we're really excited about the completion of these. partnering with Lake Agassiz Habitat to do single-family builds and high school builds as we work on those construction projects. And then partnering with Cass Clay Community Land Trust as we do new type of construction, a twin home project in the Jefferson neighborhood as well. And then as we start to look at capital improvements in the Madison neighborhood, this is also a much needed gap in trail that's been needed for 20-some years that the neighborhood's been asking for. No local tax funds, went into this project. And as we try to fund other infrastructure needs, CDBG funds are looked at more and more as trying to fill those gaps. Also in direct outreach and providing for vulnerable populations, we kicked off working with a public health team, street outreach, more entrenched street outreach program at in the downtown areas, and then working to keep our shelters nimble and stable as we see that increasing need. So moving forward, the rest of my presentation includes the 2025 allocations would have been published by the federal government, as well as what we call rolling over funds from past years. And so both in CDBG and home, we've had to terminate a few projects and re-strategize and reprioritize. That's not on anybody's fault or anybody's change of plans. It's really just the work it takes to get these projects to align with the timing. And so as we look at unused funds and terminated projects, we're looking at a total for this next year at what point, 49 for CDBG funds. And then as we look at home funds, similarly, in terms of project income, recaptured funds from past grants, as well as future projects and past projects and unused contingency, we have a 1.6 million as it relates to the 2025 allocation plan. As we project into the next 5 years, you can see those top lines of allocation, 457 and 874, as that's what we're forecasting for the next 4 years after this year. So I think the question most people are wondering about today, or if you work with these funds, is how do we allocate those funds moving forward? And so we are kind of in full swing with administrative changes and how we spend the funding as altered from years past. Currently, we're really working on direct partnership connection with organizations who are already administrating HUD funds today, going back to that efficiency need. And since those funds are at risk, as I mentioned, we're trying to figure out how to build capacity to sustain, and so to make sure we're not overcommitted if something unpredictable were to happen. And this also means if you've been expecting it and looking for it, we're not administrating a NOFO or a notice of funding yet this year. Instead, we're going to be doing similar to how the state is doing, in which we're allocating our notice of funding related to activities as opposed to just general call for project ideas. And this really helps us work with applications, pre-application, and get those ready. What we were starting to do is fall into, as you can see in those rollover funds, risk of not spending the money in a timeliness manner. So similar to what the state has had to deal with, Grand Forks has had to deal with, and we had to deal with the last previous HUD consolidated plan cycle. And it gets really difficult if you're working on a workout plan, trying to keep up and those spending expenditures. What we're hearing is there's some waivers being proposed at the federal level on getting rid of some of those constraints, and that would be helpful. But at this point in time, we're really trying to figure out how to manage those funds so they get out in a real timeliness manner. And that means more work of the project or the grant or the need what I would call pre-application, and before it's ready for funding. And for those that are watching, maybe watching or streaming this, it's probably worth noting that probably a minimum need for project allocation is $150,000 or more. And as we try to streamline our resources and management. In years past, if you watched yesterday's informational meeting, in years past, these funds used to get intermixed with our social service funds, which are grant administrated. And so if you are a nonprofit from years past that maybe received social service funds and maybe weren't sure if they were federal funded or social service funded, those back in 2018, we segregated those into different processes. So as we look to what we're going to fund for Future Forward, we're really looking at back to that risk assessment, in which sometimes gets us in uncomfortable discussions about, what is those organizational structure? What is your individual organization's strategic plan and organizational plan? What are your other funding sources? So there's really strict regulations on whether or not we can intermingle funds. And then that means if your project's private funded, we're even going to dig in deeper on what those private funds are about and how much administrative support you need. So it's probably not uncommon if you're in a nonprofit, recognizing you're already stretched really thin in most nonprofits in doing, wearing a hat of many different jobs. And so what does that administration support look like to make sure you as an executive director or project administrator have the support internally that you need? And what is your understanding of federal regulations and its requirement? And so those are the kind of tough conversations we have moving forward, unfortunately, but as part of the stewardship of federal funds. So since we're not doing a notice of funding, how do we seek funds moving forward? If I'm in your shoes, I'm wondering that question. And so what I would say at this point in time is, please keep in touch with us. Keep in touch with the planning department on your strategic plans. As you have community findings, awareness, knowledge, front lines information, we want to know that information and have meetings with you, have discussions with you as it works towards that. We may not all be available like at the drop of a hat, but as part of a long conversation, having these conversations about understanding the community structure and the community needs to support these initiatives, if you will. Submit letters, emails, correspondence with your assessment, with your understandings, with your awareness. When, for instance, I remember when the Great Plains Food Bank did their hunger initiative, we were in the direct recipient of those strategic plans and those updates, and that was great information that we could just plug and play into our procedures and plans. So when we do open notice of funding opportunities, please just submit your questions and reach out to us, and we're glad to talk about those. As we have strategic planning opportunities, as you can see, we're moving into more of the strategic plans like the Core Neighborhoods Plan, the Housing Regional Study, those types of metro-wide discussions. We'll make sure you're on those notification lists, and we'll do better about our databases and intermingling those with our land use planning and other activities. We're working really collaboratively with public health and some of these other health initiatives as we figure out our strategic needs. And then, speaking of which, leaning on those key government agencies with your information about housing, food, and transportation as they all fill that circle of defining those social determinants of health and public needs as we try to operationalize our fundings as strategically as possible. So our schedule moving forward is today is June 10th. We have our public input meeting. Starting next week, we'll be publishing a 30-day comment period where it's just, may look like it's complete in terms of a draft consolidated plan. However, it's not. It's, spoiler alert, it's just high level. And so if you do have direct correspondence over the next 30 days, please reach out to us. We're glad to take that input. There's a little sheet in the back if you'd like to fill that out instead. July 7th, we'll have a public meeting, much like this, at the City Commission. And then we look to having a plan completed, at least that high-level 5-year plan that would be submitted to HUD in August. And so we do expect funds to have available probably early next year. This year, there's not any immediate dollars to write a check with today, but early next year, we'll hopefully have access to those funds. So as you strategize on your project development. So at this case, that really concludes my presentation. That took a little longer than I had planned. Open it up for Q&A. We have a microphone. It is televised, by the way, so if you like to have one-on-one conversations, we're more than glad to do that too, and hang around after this meeting. Everybody speak at once. And I can get away from the podium too at this point. Does anybody want to talk? Market level or round table or if not, we can conclude and just talk as a group. How do we do that? Yeah, so with this, I think I'll just conclude this meeting. We'll stop the televising and then we'll be around for questions. And then some of you might want to talk with each other as you converse. So thanks very much, everybody.